Dr. Du Plessis, thanks so very much for joining us here on SABC News. Certainly do appreciate you giving us your time.
Good afternoon. Very good to be with you.
Let's talk about the Archbishop's contribution to climate change in connection to social justice, which was very close to his heart. And perhaps maybe you can talk to us about that close link between the two seemingly different issues.
Yes, I think it's important to remember that Archbishop Tutu was perhaps one of the most leading voices and most recognized voices who very early on, already in 2009 and perhaps even a little before that, pointed out that climate change is in fact a human rights crisis. Now, this penny has dropped slowly for many people and still hasn't dropped for many others. Yeah. But he certainly was ahead of his time in making this point very, very powerfully. In 2009, he lent his voice to the Earth Hour campaign, which is a campaign run by WWF and others across the world. And in that process, over the subsequent years in which he was patron of Earth Hour, billions of people, in fact, we can comfortably say hundreds of millions of people, and perhaps as many as 1.5 to 2 billion people were mobilized in that process to lend their voices to making a statement that this is a human crisis indeed.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about him having been the patron of Earth Hour, so you've obviously had, quite a bit of interactions with the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. As WWF, talk to us and take us through those sort of interactions that you had with the Arch, particularly on the issue of climate change.
Yes, so the Arch, as I said, in 2009, lent his name to this campaign globally and in South Africa. And then in 2010, of course, he stepped back from his public appearances. However, WWF International, the global WWF network, celebrated its 50th anniversary in Switzerland that year. And I had the privilege to travel with the Arch to Zurich, where he was the keynote speaker at this WWF event. And there the theme of his speech was fundamentally focused on climate change and the human injustices around climate change. And as I said, he was well ahead of his time, although here in South Africa we might have been much more sensitized to these issues. It took a voice as powerful and as humble as his to penetrate the hearts and minds of those in developed countries who attended that particular event extremely well.
Yeah, I suppose one should ask for, a message from WWF and I suppose your feelings really as a grouping, having now lost a great figure who fought, I suppose, alongside you on, issues that you're trying to really highlight as an organization.
Yes, of course, we've lost something that, someone who's absolutely irreplaceable. But I think in the clip just before this interview, you showed the seeds of what he's leaving as his legacy as young, powerful speakers across Africa, here in South Africa, but also elsewhere, who's standing up and speaking the kind of truth that he would love to know was being spoken after he's left us.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe just going back, how did you identify him, as WWF, as someone who can be a big voice that, can help you to highlight issues around the climate crisis, which, is worsening every day?
You see, so as I said earlier, here in South Africa, because of our particular political issues and the a very skewed society in which we live, we, as an environmental organization and other environmentalists, have for a long time realized the link between people and the environment and climate change in particular. And so it made very common sense for us and for me to be introduced to the Arch and then to start the conversations to get him to lend his name. But, he taught us, there was no sort of prompting. He taught us a lot more about the human dimensions of climate change than we'd ever imagine would come from somebody like that. And he immediately embraced this cause, which of course was so widespread. And of course, in his role with the elders, he also played a very significant role in mobilizing the elders. These are people like Kofi Annan and Bill Clinton and Richard Branson and Mary Robinson. And he kept the elders very much on track and kept the hopes alive for a 1.5 degree global warming target, when at that time people were only talking about a very modest 2 degree target. So he kept these things alive, and it was very natural for us to align with him. Of course, the Arch is was such a wonderful human being. When he first met me, of course, he'd seen my name, etc., and he addressed me in perfect Afrikaans. And I, of course, tried my best to speak to him in Xhosa. But that was the nature of the man. So whenever we met, we had this little 2-language interaction. And then, of course, when we talked more technical issues, we broke into English. But he certainly was very fluent in many, many languages, including Afrikaans.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much for sharing some of your memories on the Arch and certainly his contribution to your cause. That is Dr. Morne Du Plessis, the CEO for World Fund for Nature in South Africa.